Throughout the travels of the heroes and villains through the lands of Arda, we come across many creatures of both good and evil origins. From the eagles of the skies to the wargs of the orcs, from the raven messengers of Erebor to the Oliphants of the Haradrim. These animals and creatures take part in the actions of the ages and some of the most influential moments across all of Arda. What's up, everyone? And today on the Petty Lords, we are going to count down 10 of some of the coolest and most stunning animals and creatures across the lands of Arda. If you're digging the Arda lore and stories, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more character breakdowns, locations, battles, and more from this wonderful world of Tolkien. Now, while we are going to list these creatures in a top 10 style format, by no means are these creatures ranked on power or prowess, but rather their actions in the lands and battles across the stories, and perhaps just some cute influence overall. At the start, we are going to make some honorable mentions, as these creatures and or characters were too good to be left out of this video. First up, the fell beast of the Nazgul. Now, not dragons or birds, these were big winged, naked black creatures, not possessing feathers, but rather pinions in between their horned fingers. They were bred by Sauron after the Nine lost their black horses at the flood of the Brunnen, while pursuing the ring-bearer Frodo Baggins. These creatures assisted the Nine in their search for the One Ring in the later times of the War of the Ring. Legolas, after receiving a bow from Galadriel, shoots a fell beast down on the Fellowship's journey, and the Shield Maiden, Eowyn of Rohan, kills a fell beast of the Witch King on the Pelennor fields. When the One Ring is finally destroyed, Mount Doom explodes and erupts, and in the destruction, the fell beast and the Nazgul are destroyed. And an odd but cute creature we only hear about in a quick piece of a poem is an otter, believe it or not, that Tom Bombadil manages to find. Tom calls this otter Whisker Lad. In the adventures of Tom Bombadil, as he boats down a river, the verse goes something like this.
He teases a kingfisher that leaves behind an old feather, which Tom puts onto his hat.
And as always, sorry to say, that's about it. But we had to mention because these little guys are just too cute to leave out. Plus, I promised my niece. Haha. Next, another odd one is a badger. Badgers were known in the Westlands for being excellent hole diggers. A mysterious kind of apparently sentient badger only told of in the legends were called badger folk. Tom Bombadil tells Frodo and the hobbits some rather absurd stories about what he calls the queer way of the badgers. And yet again, that's all we get to hear of them. And the last quick mention is the skin changer Beorn. Is he a man? Is he a bear? Is he a creature? Or is it D, all of the above? While a neat and pivotal character in The Hobbit, we at least wanted to mention him here. But later down the road, we will absolutely be giving the Great Skin Changer his own video. I guess we will leave that up to you to decide in the comments below. Now that we have made a few mentions, let's dive into our list of some of the top creatures of Arda. As a quick note, while dragons are some of the coolest creatures ever, they will be set aside on this video. But if you want to know more about the dragons of Arda, you can check out our video on dragons, guest starring our voice actress Quinn as Glaurung the dragon. Number 10. Vampires. While as usual, almost nothing is known about them, though Tolkien does mention one by name, Theringuitho. She was a messenger of Morgoth who would deliver news from the Dark Lord to his greatest lieutenant, Sauron. After the downfall of Tolan Gareth, the island of werewolves, the elf maiden Luthien takes on the guise of Theringuitho, along with disguising her soon-to-be husband Beren as the werewolf Dragulin, to help the pair sneak into England. Also, in that same battle, where Huon the Hound defeats Sauron, Sauron then shapeshifts into a serpent, then into a vampire as he flees from his defeat. On one occasion after this fight, it is said that Sauron was seen flying over forest, dripping blood from his fangs. After this story, there are no more mentions of them having existed after the First Age. Some theories suggest that vampires may have been the Maiar that joined the Dark Lord Morgoth in the beginning, but nothing concrete so far has been able to prove this. But it's a fun theory to think on, even though we do know that most of the Dark Maiar that followed Morgoth became Balrogs. Number 9. Ravens. Ravens were large black birds of Middle-earth, sometimes associated with ill news of death or destruction, and were also known for their harsh voices. The ravens of Erebor often brought secret news to the people of Thror, the king under the mountain, and in return were rewarded with bright objects like gold or silver to hide in their dwellings and homes throughout Dale and Raven Hill. Also, these birds were quite long-lived, with the oldest one known living to be 153 years old. The ravens of Raven Hill were actually capable of speech and would communicate with dwarves often. Kark, a notable raven chief, had been one of these great birds along with his son Roa, who continued his father's leadership role around the year of 2941 of the Third Age. Roic was described in The Hobbit as being bald on the top of his head and the most ancient and decrepit-looking bird. He was almost blind and could barely fly when he met Thorin and his company at the Lonely Mountain. Roic was the one who helped send the message from Thorin Oakenshield asking for help from his cousin Dane Ironfoot in the Iron Hills. With such neat messengers, we wish we could have seen and read more about them. Number 8. Cats. Yes, cats, folks. Believe it or not, cats make a few appearances in the writings of Tolkien, especially in the early writings. The Tale of Tinuviel, where one of the main antagonists was a black cat by the name of Tevildo, and he was the Prince of Cats. Cats in that time of the First Age were servants of Morgoth, also known in this story as Melko. They worked his kitchens, believe it or not, and were in charge of serving the Dark Lord his meals and meats. In the Tale of Tinuviel, Beren is caught by orcs and put into the service of Tevildo to hunt and trap meats for the Dark Lord's table. When Luthien finally comes to free Beren in this tale, Tevildo and his cats are out hunting one day and are chased away by Luthien's companion Huan the Hound. Tevildo is actually treed by Huan, and in order to leave this personal skirmish of his, he has to give Luthien his most prized possession, his golden collar, to let Luthien go and use his collar as evidence to retrieve Beren from the kitchen of Melko. And of course, Tevildo's nemesis was Huan the Hound. Go figure. Later we hear of cats is a Queen of Gondor, Queen Beruthiel, a black Númenorian that was taken to wife by the then King of Gondor, Taranan Falister, the 12th King of Gondor. Ironically, Queen Beruthiel loathed cats. They became attracted to her for this precise reason. At her time in the capital city of Osgiliath, she had 10 cats, 9 black cats, and 1 white cat, with who she conversed with. She trained her cats to go on evil errands throughout the night to spy on her enemies or to simply terrify them. And in return, the white cat would spy on the black cats to make sure they were completing their tasks. Her cats were almost as infamous as she was among the Gondorians. All were afraid of them and did not dare to touch them, and they were cursed whenever they were seen amongst the city. Eventually, the queen was exiled by her king, and the cats with her. The king had her set adrift at sea before a north wind alone that was seen flying past Umbar under a sickle moon, with a cat at the masthead and another as a figurehead on the prow. Number 7. Elephants, or Oliphants. The elephants of the land were known as the mighty Mumakil, and in the west, known as Oliphants. They were massive elephant-type creatures with tusks that were often used in battle by the men of the south. The the Southrons, or the Haradrim. According to the Red Book of Westmarch written by Bilbo, Frodo, and Sam, they were bigger than a house. In the years of the War of the Ring, the warriors of Harad came north to Gondor at the call of Sauron, and with their legions they brought the mighty Mumakil. These creatures were harnessed with red banners, bands, and trimmings of gold, and on their backs war towers were built, from which archers and spearmen fought from. These creatures had a natural bloodlust, and they used their massive weight and size to crush foes under their feet, and also used their massive tusks to gore and stab foes. And sometimes the Haradrim would modify the tusks and adorn them with additional weapons such as spikes and triplines to cause even more massive amounts of damage on the enemy. These thick-skinned beasts were almost invulnerable to arrows besides their eyes, which were commonly targeted to blind the animal in hopes of sending it into a rage or panic. When successful, the animals would half the time turn on their masters and turn to flee, trampling warriors of their own army, an amazing and lethal creature to both friends and foe alike. Number 6. Wargs. Wargs were a breed of wolves in the Dark Lord Sauron's service, commonly living in the Misty Mountains. They were described as being giant, intelligent, and malevolent like wolves. They were used as mounts by the orcs of Isengard and Mordor, and some of these creatures even had an alliance with the goblins of the north. They first appear in The Hobbit when Thorin and company are attacked by a group of these creatures as they travel eastward towards the Lonely Mountain. The notable mention of these creatures is when Thorin and his company are trapped by a pack of wargs on a cliffside, which is a fun scene in the Peter Jackson movies. They tree the dwarves, hobbit, and wizard, but are waylaid by Gandalf and his special pine cones, along with the help of the great eagles of the sky. The next good mention of these wargs is when the people of Rohan are fleeing to Helm's Deep and one of their scouts reports wolf riders in the area, which eventually attacked the caravan of people. After a quick but bloody battle, our heroes defeat the orcs and the wargs and kill most of them while the rest flee. These creatures also took place in the Battle of Five Armies, assisting the orcs and other foul creatures in their attempted war upon Dale and Erebor. Number 5. Werewolves. Now, believe it or not, werewolves actually play a big part of the First Age as they assist Morgoth and their creator Sauron in the pair's attempted war on Beleriand. These creatures were created by Sauron on the island of Minas Tirith, not the city of men of the Third Age, but the tower built by Galadriel's brother Finrod in the First Age. After Sauron's takeover of the island, it was renamed Tolkien, the Island of Werewolves, and these were not the two-legged walking werewolves we are used to seeing in modern stories, but rather just big, muscular wolves that were extremely dangerous. The first of the werewolves was named Dragulin, a huge black werewolf who was the strongest of them all. After Dragulin, his scion named Kakarath was a big part of the story of Beren and Luthien. In the tale of Beren and Luthien, Beren convinces Finrod to aid him in his quest for a Cimmerel. Beren, Finrod, and a small company of elves venture north, but are caught by Sauron and imprisoned at Tolkien. Sauron has the company eaten one at a time by werewolves until one night a werewolf comes to claim Beren's life. Finrod breaks his bonds and chains and uses the last of his strength to kill the wolf and save his friend's life. Finrod dies from his wounds, but Beren survives the ordeal. Soon after, Luthien comes to the island to free her love from Sauron, and after a parley is let go by Luthien and Huan. After this, Beren, Luthien, and Huan head to Angband to steal a Cimmerel, and Luthien disguises Beren as Dragulin, and herself as Theringuitho, the vampire, and attempt to head into the fortress. They are confronted at the gate by Dragulin's scion, Kakarath. Kakarath was told of his sire's passing and is confused by seeing Beren disguised as his sire. But before he can act, Luthien puts a spell on him and he falls asleep at the gate. After the pair steal a Cimmeril and escape from Angband, Kakarroth awakens at the gates and confronts the pair as they attempt to flee. Beren attempts to use the light of the Cimmeril to blind the creature, but Kakarroth is unfazed, lunges forward, and bites the hand of Beren, taking his hand, Cimmeril and all, and flees from the pain the Cimmeril causes him. Shortly after, Kakarroth is found in the woods of Doriath and killed, and the jewel is reclaimed. Now, while briefly mentioned by Gandalf to the hobbits that werewolves still existed in the Third Age, the creatures were rare in the world, and at that current time were not seen by many. Number 4, spiders. Yes, that's right, spiders. From the ears of the trees all the way to the Third Age, spiders and spider-like creatures are a big part of both Morgoth and Sauron's forces alike. In the ears of the trees, Morgoth heads south while in Valinor and comes across a spirit of darkness named Ungoliant, who takes the form of a giant spider. After a truce is formed between the two, Ungoliant cloaks both herself and Morgoth in shadow, and they make their way towards the two trees themselves. Once there, Morgoth strikes both trees with his spear, and Ungoliant feeds upon the sap of the two trees and grows tremendously in size. The two escape Valinor across the Helcaraxe and come to Middle-earth, but once there, Ungoliant turns on Morgoth and almost kills the Dark Lord. He lets out a mighty cry, and swift as the wind, his Balrogs come forth and drive off Ungoliant to the southwest to the mountains of Erd Gorgoroth. There she lays for years, breeding many spiders until she supposedly consumes herself in her hunger. The spiders spread across Middle-earth to all the lands, mountains, and forest. Her greatest offspring is Shelob, another massive spider that comes to reside on the border of Mordor in the pass of Cirith Ungol. She lives there for many years, feeding on anything that enters her lair. And we mean anything, folks. Orcs, men, goblins, elves, maybe the occasional hobbit, but whatever she could get her hands on. In the story Return of the King, Gollum leads Frodo and Sam up the pass and into Shelob's lair. In his greatest piece of treachery yet, Gollum slips the hobbit Frodo and allows Shelob to strike. Shelob manages to chase Frodo around the mountain and finally catches the hobbit shortly after. As she wraps him up for dinner, Samwise Gamgee comes and attacks. In one of the biggest upsets in sheer size and scale, Samwise manages to mortally wound the spider, and she flees the battle to slink away and die in her lair. Number 3, the Meras. The Meras were a breed of wild horses in the north region of Middle-earth. They surpass normal horses in intelligence, speed, and strength. According to the lore of the Legendarium, the ancestors of the Meras were brought from the west shores of Valinor by the Vala Orome the Hunter. The story goes that one of the first kings of the Eothade, named Leod, attempted to tame the first of the Meras named Felaroth. When Leod tries to saddle and ride the horse, Felaroth bucks wildly and throws the king from his back, and in his fall, Leod dies from his injuries. Soon after, Leod's son, Errol, hunts down the horse, but instead of killing the horse, he demands service from the horse in order to pay for the death of his father, and Felaroth accepts. Much later, Errol rides to Gondor to assist the Gondorians in the war against Rhûn. In the victory, Steward Cirion grants the land of Calinarthon to Errol, and in turn this becomes the land of Rohan. 30 years later, Errol and Felaroth die and are buried together. Felaroth's descendants would become the mounts of the kings of Rohan. During the Third Age, Gandalf the Grey was given consent to ride Shadowfax, Lord of the Meras, Felaroth's descendant. Shadowfax continued to accompany Gandalf throughout the later half of the War of the Ring. After the war is won and the elves and Gandalf return to Valinor, Shadowfax accompanies the group on the ship and returns himself to the land from which his line comes from. Number 2, the eagles. Okay folks, so this is a big one as these creatures constantly come to the aid of the free peoples of Middle-earth across all ages. According to lore, these birds were faithful to Manwë, king of the Valar, and were his eyes and agents across all of Arda to inform him of the workings of the world. These great birds possess the ability to see through all physical matter, except the blackness of Morgoth's evil. At the beginning of the First Age, the leader of the eagles, Thrandur, makes his eyries at the top of Thingordrum, the 3 mighty peaks that Morgoth raised from the Iron Mountains. Thrandur helps the elf Fingon rescue Feanor's sons, Mithras, from the peaks of the mountain after he is captured by Morgoth and hung from the mountain by his wrists. After this, Thrandur and his eagles move their eyries to the Castraigrim, the mountains that encircle the elven realm of Gondolin. They then become friends of King Turgon and agree to patrol the skies around Gondolin. During the War of Wrath, the elven king Fingolfin challenges Morgoth to single combat. Fingolfin falls to Morgoth after this fight, but before the Dark Lord can defile the king's body, Thrandur swoops in and hits Morgoth in the face and scars him and saves the king's body. The next great battle these eagles take part in is in the end of the War of Wrath, when Morgoth unleashes the winged dragons upon the battlefield. Arendelle, father of Elrond and Elros, sails the skies in his ship, Vingulat, with Thrandur and the eagles at his side. They defeat the winged dragons and help bring an end to this conflict. In the Second Age, a pair of eagles make an eyrie in the king's house of Arminelos in Numenor, until the time of King Tar Ankaliman, when the Numenorians become hostile towards the Valar. Towards the end of Numenor, the Valar sent storm clouds in the shape of the great eagles in an attempt to warn the Numenorians of their folly and impending doom. In The Hobbit, Gwaihir and Landroval are the chiefs of the eagles and patrol the skies of the Misty Mountains. Gwaihir helps to rescue Thorin and company from the cliffside attack of the orcs and bears them to safety, and then later accompanies Radagast and Beorn to the Battle of 5 Armies. They help to secure this victory as they come just in the nick of time. When Gandalf is captured by Saruman and held at Isengard, it is Gwaihir himself that rescues Gandalf from the tower and bears him to Rohan. And lastly, when King Aragorn leads the men of the West at the Battle of the Morannon, the Eagles join the fight once again and attack the Nazgul and their fell beasts to secure the skies in victory for the men of the West. After the destruction of Sauron, Gwaihir, Landroval, and an unnamed eagle fly into Mordor to rescue Frodo and Sam from the lava flows of Mountain Doom and bear them to the field of Cormollin to their friends and allies to rejoin them and rejoice in victory. And number 1, Huan the Hound. Here we are, folks, the number 1, and in our opinion, it goes to the Hound of Valinor, Huan the Hound. Huan was a large hound that served the Vala in Valinor and said to be so big he was almost as big as a horse. Huan also literally means great dog, deriving from the Sindarin word hu, meaning hound. Huan was originally a hunting hound of the Vala Orome, but was gifted to Feanor's son Celegorm when the Noldor left Valinor and went to Middle-earth in pursuit of Morgoth and new lands alike. Huan accompanied Celegorm through many adventures until one day in the First Age, the brothers Curufin and Celegorm come across an elf maiden in the forest. The maiden is none other than Luthien, Baron's lover, who is on her way to Tol Garath to free Baron from Sauron. The brothers agree to help, but instead lead Luthien not north towards Angband, but rather south to Nargothrond. At this point, Celegorm falls for Luthien and plans to wed the maiden to force an alliance with the king of Doriath, Luthien's father, Thingol. Taking pity on Luthien, Huan helps Luthien to escape and bears her away towards Tol Garath, the Isle of Werewolves. Upon arrival, Finrod dies defending Beren from a werewolf, and Beren is left alive in his cell grieving for the loss of his friend. Sauron, seeing that Luthien at the base of his tower, sends werewolves to capture her. One by one, Huan slays them all. Finally, the father of werewolves, Dragolin, is sent after the Hound of Valinor. Huan defeats Dragolin in single combat. Having enough of this, Sauron takes the form of a giant werewolf and heads to the bridge to challenge Huan himself. But even the Dark Lord is no match for Huan and is pinned by the Hound to the ground by his throat. After agreeing to leave the island, Sauron shapeshifts to a serpent and then a vampire and flees the area. Luthien rescues Beren, and the trio make their way to Angband, only after Luthien demolishes Tol and Gadath. After a few events, Beren and Luthien steal a Cimmeril and escape from Angband. During the escape, the door guard of Angband, a werewolf named Kakoroth, attacks the couple, and Beren loses his hand and the Cimmeril to the werewolf, and Kakoroth flees. After Beren, Luthien, and Huan make their way back to Doriath, the trio and the realm hear of a werewolf causing troubles in the woods and decide to investigate. Beren, Huan, King Thingol, Maeglin, and a few other elves form a hunting party and track the wolf. After tracking the wolf to a section of woods, Kakoroth springs from an ambush and jumps towards the king. Beren, in turn, jumps in front of Thingol and takes the brunt of this attack and is mortally wounded from the wolf. Huan then springs the trap of his own and attacks. Huan and Kakoroth battle a long and bloody battle, and finally, Huan throws Kakoroth down to his death, but is mortally wounded in the fight. Speaking for his third and last time, Huan crawls to Beren, both being mortally wounded. Huan puts his head under Beren's hand and wishes him and Luthien goodbye and passes, his spirit returning to the land from where he came. So what do you think, folks? Did we miss a creature or two? I'm sure we did, but with so many to choose from, we tried to narrow it down with some of the more notable creatures. Well, there you have it, folks, our countdown of some of the most notable creatures from across the lands and ages of Arda. Don't forget, if you're digging the Arda lore and stories, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe on your way out and click the notification bell for when the new videos or shorts come out. So until next time, as we say, remember folks, we are not runic emperors, just the petty lords.